Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of I don't have a show dedicated to comic book review recommendations, but here's one anyways. I just read volume 1 of Snotgirl, which I picked up for the obvious reason that it's written by Brian Lee O'Malley, who wrote Scott Pilgrim, one of my favorite things ever, as well as Seconds, which is a great graphic novel. And it's illustrated by Leslie Hung, who I had never heard of, and flipping through this book in the store, I wasn't exactly sure about the art. It's got kind of a Tumblr art slant to it, is how I felt. Like, it looks like internet artwork, with maybe a slight manga influence, but, you know, at first I was unsure about it, but actually reading it in the context of the story, it all looks really good. It's a story about fashion bloggers, particularly this girl who's a major fashion blogger named Lottie, and she's kind of losing her fucking mind. This story is very similar to Seconds by Brian Lee O'Malley, and thinking about why this came about, because I believe this is the first time he's written a comic that he did not draw himself, at least the first time I've seen one. And I would have to imagine that it's because he seemed to have a pretty slow workflow. Like, it took a long time for all the Scott Pilgrim volumes to come out. Seconds was years later, and he's kind of been quiet for a long time since, so I figure maybe he teamed up with an artist because he realized that it takes him too goddamn long to draw his own comics, or maybe he just thought that, you know, the art style that would be required for this kind of story was one he didn't have, or maybe even it was just that because the main character of this is so similar to the main character from Seconds, it would have felt too similar if he had also drawn it. I can't say for sure, but this girl Lottie is a fashion blogger who's extremely self-obsessed. She hates the people that she's surrounded herself with, but doesn't really have anywhere else to go. Towards the start of the story, she's become estranged from her boyfriend. You know, she's on the cusp of turning 26. She sees herself as better as a fashion blogger than all the people that she's around. And she kind of has a really big problem where she has extreme allergies that cause her to constantly have snot and tears running down her face. And, you know, she doesn't present that at all in her online persona. She works very hard to make sure that the person that she is in her blog is not who she is in real life, which is a narcissistic asshole with a bad allergy problem. But in spite of being so narcissistic, she's also very neurotic and can't really deal with people. She's socially awkward. She kind of, in spite of thinking of herself as much better than everyone else as a fashion blogger, as a socialite, she is terrible. And she thinks that she's extremely uncool. She has, like, you know, pretty bad self-esteem issues as a human being, you know, and kind of blames her friends for being shit. But in the first issue, she meets this girl who she nicknames Cool Girl, who's, like, basically has all the things that she wishes she was, like someone who's just charismatic and nice and fun, and she immediately wants to be her best friend because she's like, you know, this is what I'm missing, and she can't believe this girl's even willing to talk to her because she's you know, she's such a shit, essentially. This, I'm just gonna come right out and say that reading this felt like looking in a mirror. This girl, I mean, look, I'm 25 going on 26. You know, I'm about as close to 26 as she is at the start of this story. This takes place over a pretty long period of time. Time skips frequently. And God, there's page 4 of this book. There's a moment where she looks at her phone and it says, 0 new messages from friends. 75,000 messages from strangers, or notifications from strangers. And I was just like, yep. Then a couple pages later, one page later, She's, got snot running down her nose. She's reading other people's blogs and saying, "You're the worst. Why even bother updating? Just stop with the maxi dresses. No one cares. What year is it? What's wrong with you? Everyone else sucks. I'm the best. Me." And I thought, God, this is a comic about me. Especially the part where she's losing her mind. Thinks she's better than everyone else. Most of her friends have either left her behind or don't care. Difficulty with social situations. Constantly thinking she's uncool and that she doesn't belong in the place that she is. In spite of the fact that she's heart-stoppingly beautiful. And, and a fashionista. And very confident in her appearance. She always feels like she doesn't belong around people, around human beings. Shouldn't be there. In whatever situation she's in. If I sound weird and stilted right now, I'm fairly drunk. And so at the start of the story, she starts taking these pills to help with her allergy problem, which, as the story goes along, you start to feel like the allergy problem is maybe metaphorical. And also, like, this girl who starts appearing before her, this cool girl who she starts hanging out with, may or may not exist only in her mind. There's a sort of mystery plot going on with this girl where she ostensibly kills her on accident in the first chapter, and then just completely loses it and spends most of the book going insane, and no one else really recognizes what's going on with her or cares. She doesn't know how to deal with it. This is a story about me. This felt like what my everyday life is like. Just this persistent sense of paranoia and unsureness about where the reality of your psychosis begins and ends, and whether or not anyone does or should care, whether or not you're a terrible person or you deserve better, whether or not you have a handle on what's going on with you, in spite of the fact that you're famous and living off of your art. She's even more famous than I am. She's got like 2 million followers. I don't know on what. Her blog? Instagram? Snapchat? Whatever. She's got social media. Somehow she's making money. Well, she seems to have lots of brand deals. She works with different brands as a fashion person. It doesn't matter. What really matters is who she is and what's going on in her mind. We've got other characters. This girl who used to be her secretary, who's now like a psychotic stalker of her. Her ex-boyfriend, who seems to be fucking with her somehow. The thing about this, and a detective who's obsessed with her. The thing about this story is that it all takes place in this very floaty, like, version of reality. Like, there's always this odd sense of not being sure what's really going on. Like, all the characters seem to have ulterior motives, and Lottie, who's losing it herself, who's pretty much only guided through situations by her self-interest, but even then she doesn't completely understand her own self-interest, so she's just kind of completely lost. Like, we're going through a story where our guide is someone who has no idea what's going on, and therefore I just saw a huge fucking flash of lightning. I hope that was lightning. There we go, there's the thunder. That was terrifying. Because for a second there, I wasn't sure if that was lightning, and I hear no rain. Yeah, okay. I'm not afraid that I might lose my mind in the middle of the night in a house, a giant house that I'm the only person in. That's not a weird situation to live in at all. And seeing random flashes of light in the middle of the night while talking about a story about paranoia and losing grip on reality doesn't terrify me in the slightest. So, Snotgirl, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I will say it doesn't make a whole lot of progress in this first volume. It does kind of feel like it might be spinning its wheels a little bit. Like, because it's so, like, the main character has so little idea of what's going on, and we keep kind of, the mystery just keeps deepening and deepening without really learning anything new. It's almost as though things just keep becoming more and more unclear, and we never really have a sense of what this is building to. Like, why is this happening? Is there a theme to this? Like, is this just that she's fucking going insane, or is there more to it? How do these other characters relate to what's going on? How many of them are just other tortured souls, and how many of them are conspirators, you know? Because early on, the girl, the former secretary turned stalker, is painted as sort of a villain, that she's like trying to get back at Lottie, that she's trying to steal everything that she held dear. And as Lottie's, you know, going off the deep end, she's, like, particularly paranoid about it. But then, as this story continues, we start to see that that girl is maybe more of a bit player, and that she, too, is just kind of going through the same thing that Lottie's going through, of just being, like, having no idea what's going on with herself. And so it becomes a question of, okay, well then who is the villain here? Is it Lottie herself? Does Cool Girl exist, or is she a delusion? You know, because there's elements that seem to prove her existence. Like, she's conversed with and touched other people, and, you know, there's proof that she exists, and yet at the same time, she only seems to show up at weirdly opportune moments, and only after Lottie has consumed medication, especially if in combination with alcohol. So, what is she? That's what I'm wondering. I guess the answers are to come. I don't know how long the story is supposed to go for. I hope it's, you know, I don't know. I could go for a few volumes. I enjoy just reading Brian Lee O'Malley's writing style. And in this case, because back with Scott Pilgrim, everything was like, Scott Pilgrim was very broad. It was about, like, everything that a 20-something cares about, you know? Like, it had tons of video game references, it had tons of musical references, it was just this big cultural melting pot, this zeitgeist, as Film Crit Hulk called it, of just everything that was in pop culture that a 20-year-old would influence their life, and the story kind of incorporated all of those elements into itself. And then his later books have been a little bit more focused and not quite had that level of just, like, insane density of shit going on. But while still having, you know, fun things that are kind of informed by the culture. So with Snotgirl, it's all social media. Because this girl is a fashion blogger and social media obsessed, there's the constant Snapchatting and Instagramming and tweeting and texting and being in groups and stuff like that, group chats. And she's just the right age that I feel like you could tell a story about social media that would be of people a few years younger than this, and it would be much more extreme, with, like, the level of the social media going on, or, like, the level of internet usage. But Lottie is exactly my age and uses it in exactly the way I do. So that's why I find this particularly relatable. Like, this feels like it takes place in my world. The things that these characters are concerned about are the things that I'm concerned about, you know? So, yeah, highly relatable for me. Maybe it would be for you as well. If you follow people like me, you could probably appreciate a character like this. She is maybe a little bit more extreme in being, like, super self-obsessed. Like, a lot of her thoughts are, like, comically over the top. I am great. No one deserves anything but me. You know, like, she's a caricature to some extent, but at the same time, like, the blown out of proportion version of the feelings that she's expressing, like, the realistic version of that would be relatable. So, yeah. I like it. See you next time.